There are many outcasts in our society. And traditionally, we reject them, we avoid them, but Jesus engaged them. Why the big difference?
A lot of girls are having babies and the fathers are nowhere to be found.
I've been on and off the streets over the last 10 years.
Seeing him lying on the floor helpless, when I can't do nothing about it, and he was supposed to be a member of my gang.
Heroin.
A cultural leper is someone who is untouchable in our community. They're people we don't want to engage with. Prostitutes, wife beaters, child abusers, sex offenders, felons, violent felons. They're all people that are untouchable. And I call them cultural lepers because it's like the leper of old. Remember, a leper of the Bible, as it describes, was someone who was dressed a certain way because they had leprosy. They would have to live outside of the community. They would have to cry out, unclean, unclean, to designate, let people know who they were, so people wouldn't engage with them because they weren't allowed. So they're kind of these group that you just don't touch, you just don't work with. Now, the Christian tradition is to help the leper because we got that from Jesus, because he was merciful and compassionate. And that's our call as Christians. Some people think it's some sort of ministry or calling or gift. The fact is, love is love. So similarly, as the early Christian church and Jesus had compassion for the downtrodden and the leper, we're to do that. But we've kind of lost that. And so we have to understand that these downtrodden, those untouchables, are people we need to engage and help. The sex offender is unique. I think if it's not on the bottom, it's close to the bottom of that rung of the, untouchables, these cultural lepers. This week, I engaged with a young man. He's 28 years old. Sex offense when he was 17. He's been in the system for 11 years. He has to register. He has his photo on a website, and wherever he moves, he needs to have a sign. The sheriff's office will put a sign up everywhere in that community so they know who he is. If he goes to church, the pastor will make note to everyone that he's a sex offender. And many times the sex offender just couldn't go because they were too high of a level. And so they live this situation where it's hard to get a job, that they can't get housing. And even, it's funny, a lot of these guys end up homeless, and even the homeless mistreat them. So I certainly believe they're probably on the lowest level of the rung, when it comes to, our society. This young man came to my office, and I start to engage with him, talk to him about his situation, and we went back and forth. He thought he was a high level. It turned out he was a low level. He thought he still had restrictions. It turned out, as I called an official, found out he didn't have restrictions. He didn't think he would ever stop registering, but it was a juvenile offense, so we went to the court and we got his paperwork, and in a few weeks he'll be set free. But listen to me, 11 years he was in this state and no one helped him. Remember, what happened was he gets charged, and what he says happened, and I don't know what's true in this regard, but he says he was charged because of retribution, because of an ex-boyfriend of his mother's did this to him. And so he's a boy going through the judicial system. He's poor. He's ignorant of the system. He gets a public defender. This public defender talks to the prosecutor. The prosecutor gives a plea for a lesser charge. So if he will plead guilty for a lesser charge, they'll just let him do that. Otherwise, they'll take it to court and he'll have to make 3 or 4 years in prison. So he takes the plea. even though he says he's not guilty, but he takes the plea because they make him afraid that if he takes it to court, that he'll lose the court case. 11 years. Right now, he's homeless, living in a tent with his mother. His mother's on methamphetamines. He can't get an apartment. He has a hard time getting a job. He's 28 and feels like he has no future. You must engage the cultural lepers. Action groups are a great way to do that. You get to an action group. It's simply 4 or 5 people, your friends, your family, and you get together and you pray and you ask the Holy Spirit to show you what you can do. And you go to, all the welfare offices, to jails, to feeding programs, the Salvation Army, wherever you might find that poor people, the downtrodden, the cultural lepers may go, and make yourself available. In my case, my number is all over town. And so whenever there's a need, they give me a call. And I got a call today and brought a guy in. This usually happens once, twice a week that I bring people in. Sometimes less, but I would say I average about 1 a week that I get a call. But it's because I've made myself available. For example, what do you think would happen if you put a sign out in front of your house and I will help anyone who needs help. Just give me a call. Or you put an ad in the newspaper about helping people. You're worried about doing that because you're afraid people will come and bug you and all this. But that is your mission, to care for the poor. You know the scriptures. We must act on their behalf. And we can't treat sex offenders as a special case. Now, the thing to understand about sex offenders is what they do, they put them all in the same bucket. And so someone who is a child molester gets put in the same bucket as someone who was streaking or peeing in public. And we call them all sex offenders. And unfortunately, that's horrible. And we need to change those designations so that we can distinguish really what the person did instead of treating them as though they're some sort of wicked pedophile. Your mission, as Jesus' mission was, is to care for the cultural leper. Form an action group, pray, and then act. And as you act, you'll find out new things and you'll reform your action. And you'll find yourself doing the mission of Jesus Christ.